A 16-year-old boy has been charged with murder after the death of a 15-year-old girl in Northumberland.
The girl's family, as you might expect, are said to be devastated beyond words.
As soon as we got the phone call, we knew who'd done it.
The court was told she didn't realise that shortly after leaving school, she began to be followed by a boy who she knew who was then aged 16.
It's soul destroying, just watching it.
It is torture. It's like watching a horror movie where you know the ending, but you can't change it. Your mind almost plays tricks on you. Well, it did for me. It's like, well, she's there though. She's there. Like, I can see her alive. But obviously then it hits you like a brick wall again because she's not.
Hexham in Northumberland, a quiet market town in the northeast of England, left stunned by the killing of a teenage girl.
Small community, isn't it? So, like, you know, everybody kind of knows everybody and everybody feels it.
Holly Newton was repeatedly stabbed in an alleyway in the town centre less than 2 hours after leaving school on Friday, the 27th of January 2023.
I can confirm we have launched a murder investigation following the tragic death of a 15-year-old girl yesterday.
Holly, from nearby Haltwhistle, was taken to hospital but died shortly after arriving. Another teenager who tried to stop the attack also suffered serious injuries but survived.
The family must be torn apart. You know, there's going to be so many lives going to be affected by the ripple effects of this.
Logan MacPhail, who was 16 and had until recently been Holly's boyfriend, was arrested at the scene and charged with her murder. Holly had ended their relationship just days before, after her friends had told her that it wasn't healthy.
He didn't like her having other friends, he didn't like her going out without him. He needed to know where she was all the time. He was ringing her so many times throughout the day. She wanted to have her friends over and things, and he didn't agree with that, and there was arguments over that as well. There just wasn't a break for her. I think her friends kind of told her, this isn't normal. Your relationship with him isn't normal at all. You need to tell him that you don't want to be with him anymore. And I think at first that was a bit of a shock to Holly.
Holly Newton loved to have fun. She loved her younger siblings, she loved to dance, and she wanted to become a dance teacher.
She was beautiful. She lit up the room when she came in. She was funny. All the kids loved her. She would send me pictures of her practicing and doing things in a field, so she had the space, and then sending us videos over. She was always dancing. She loved it, and she was so excited to be going to our first dance festival. She wanted to improve and win the trophies, but that's something that she didn't have the time to do.
It was all just control. Everything was control, and when he couldn't control, then there was an issue.
How did you feel about that?
Well, in the beginning, I don't think we realised how bad it was. I think it was like the last few months we realised how bad it was.
Holly had found it difficult to end her relationship with MacPhail, who she'd met 18 months before at Army Cadets. He changed the passwords on her social media accounts and continued to contact her, her friends and her family after they'd broken up. Was there anything that made you think he was going to threaten her life at all?
No, nothing.
If we thought that for 1 second, he wouldn't have been allowed anywhere near her.
If anything, we thought he would hurt himself. Part of the reason why Holly also kept going back to him was because he'd kept saying to her that if you leave me, I'll kill myself, several times. And I'd said to her, but Holly, you can't stay with somebody because they're threatening to do something to themselves. And she said, I know, but I'll never forgive myself. And I said, yeah, but what somebody does to you when you end a relationship, that's on them, it's not on you. And Everybody is entitled to end a relationship and there shouldn't be any consequences for that.
McPhail's obsessive behaviour escalated. The night before he killed Holly, he got the bus to halt whistle and made his way to her home, where he waited outside for hours in the freezing cold. He rang Holly several times, but she didn't answer. McPhail claimed he'd gone there because he wanted to get his games console back. The teenager, whose reading and writing is extremely limited, repeatedly sent voice notes to one of Holly's siblings, begging to be allowed in.
Open up your back window. She doesn't have to see me. Come on, open up your window and I'll climb in right now. Just hold your key down and I'll sneak in.
The sibling refused to let him in, and the police eventually came to take McPhail, who'd been reported missing by his family, away.
I think if he'd somehow managed to get into the house, then possibly
been a whole different story.
Could have been a whole different story, but we could have been looking at maybe more than one murder.
Holly sent a message to a friend the next day saying McPhail was basically stalking her. Holly's mum contacted officers and arranged a meeting for that afternoon to discuss what to do about it.
They agreed to come out at 4 o'clock on the Friday. So I told Holly and she said, but I was supposed to be going out with my friends tonight. And I'd said, well, I'm going to have to pick you up because the police are coming out. We need to kind of sort this out. And she'd begged me for a good, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes, but Mum, I want to go out. He ruins everything for me. I want to go out. And in the end, the biggest mistake of my life, I'd agreed.
Holly's mum Michaela shifted the time of the meeting with the police, not knowing her daughter would never come home to attend it. Holly had been nervous that her ex-boyfriend would turn up at her school, but everything seemed okay as she left at the end of the day to spend what was left of the afternoon with friends. They wandered around the market town, doing things teenagers do, visiting shops and cafes. What Holly didn't know was that McPhail had left school early and had travelled more than 20 miles by bus to Hexham. CCTV showed him covering his face so he could follow Holly without her knowing. Cameras picked him up in a supermarket car park, hiding behind a building, a trolley park and cars. In court he said he'd learned about stalking people whilst attending army cadets. McPhail had with him a knife that he'd taken from the kitchen at his home. He'd been carrying it for at least a week. Phone records show he'd tried ringing Holly more than 30 times. He said it was because he wanted to know if the relationship was really over. McPhail watched from a shop doorway as Holly chatted to a boy in a bus stop next to a pizza takeaway. He admitted using his phone to peep around corners at her, claiming he wanted to get past her to catch the bus home. When Holly finally sees him, after he's been following her for 45 minutes, he acts surprised. At first all seems fine. The other boy orders food and all three talk together. Then CCTV footage shows McPhail going into the alleyway next to the takeaway.
It's so hard to watch because in those moments you can see him, you can see that he is talking her into going into the alley. And she's very, very hesitant at first. Very reluctant to go in. And you can see Holly, she's like a typical teenager. She like storms over like, I'm so tired of this. It's like watching a horror movie where you know the ending and you kind of just want to say don't do that. But obviously it's so hard to watch because in the end she goes in.
It was then that Holly was attacked with a knife. The other boy heard her screaming at McPhail to stop and get off her.
He must have heard some noise and he just runs. He obviously realises then that something is going on. As far as I know, he didn't realise he had a weapon. He didn't realise until he come out of the alley and he had wounds. He realised he was armed.
The boy tried to help Holly by running into the alleyway, grabbing her attacker and putting him in a headlock. But he was stabbed 4 times in the leg and the shoulder. The injuries Holly received, however, were catastrophic. In just 1 minute, she suffered 36 injuries. She was stabbed 12 times, suffered 19 slash wounds, and had 5 further wounds to her hands where she tried to defend herself. The attack was so brutal and sustained that the knife broke during it, and it only ended when passers-by ran in and intervened.
It's not easy to break a knife, regardless the level of force it takes to snap a blade. There was maybe half a centimetre left of the blade, and he continued using what was left to attack Holly. So in the space of that minute to cause that level of injury to another person is quite shocking.
The police arrived quickly. They started giving Holly first aid and McPhail was arrested.
Right, put your hands behind your back. Right, you're under arrest on suspicion of an assault. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence.
He told officers Holly had been horrible to him.
She's been too horrible to me, and last night we thought he meant to kill myself. I was meant to kill myself, so I went too far.
The body cam and the CCTV shows a large number of people all desperately trying to help an extremely vulnerable young girl who is gravely ill in an alleyway, which is no place for somebody to pass away in those circumstances, and everyone doing their best, but the stress and the concern is evident, except on Logan, who was calm.
It was clear to me that Holly was seriously unwell. She was unconscious. She probably had other injuries.
Specialist paramedic Jack Beattie was off duty the night Holly was attacked. An app alerted him to the fact there was a teenage girl in need of treatment for cardiac arrest near to where he lived. The age of the casualty didn't sit right with Jack.
When I was on my way down to where the incident was, I was fully expecting it to be a miscommunication, maybe even a hoax call or something like that, but I definitely wasn't expecting to see someone who had been stabbed and who was so poorly. As I was heading down there, I could hear the sirens of the other ambulances approaching as well, and I went down the alleyway, which was very dark, and the police were there, and they were performing CPR on Holly, and I knelt down beside Holly, and she was breathing. The police officers pointed out to me a stab wound that was on Holly's cheek. It was clear to me that she must have other injuries. It was unlikely that that stab wound to the face would be making her present this unwell. So myself and my colleagues who had arrived from the ambulance, we could see that she had several stab wounds to her chest and to her neck as well. Any one of those injuries could have been fatal, and she had a number of them. The decision was made then that we needed to get Holly to hospital as quickly as possible and provide all care that we could en route to hospital.
Michaela and Lee first knew something was wrong as they drove with their other children towards Hexham, and they got an unexpected phone call.
Looked at my phone, Holly's ringing us again, so I answered the phone, and it was the lady from Pizza, and she said, "I've got your daughter's phone." And again, I never thought anything of it. I went, "Oh, where she left it? I'll come and get it. So she'll be lost without." And she went, "No, she's been stabbed." I don't remember a lot after that, in all honesty, because everything just happened so fast. I remember screaming at Lee to hurry up, drive faster. It's a bit like a movie, do you know, when you just see flashbacks of things. So I remember him flashing his lights and beeping his horn, and I remember the 2 kids in the back of the car not knowing what to do and hysterical. And I remember Lee just got out of the car and ran.
Seen the paramedics working on Holly and came back out and told her, "You don't go down there. It's not something you want to see or need to see."
How was that for you, though, to see her like that?
It's going to haunt us for the rest of my life. That's for sure.
A police officer told Michaela that Holly had been moved to an ambulance.
I said, "Oh, I'll go and get in with her," and she said, "You can't." She said, "There's too many people trying to help her, and the police need to be in there as well."
Holly's stepdad came to the back of the ambulance and identified himself as her stepdad and asked what was happening. And I said to him, look, I said, she's really unwell. She's really poorly. She's got some really serious injuries, and we need to get her to hospital as quickly as we can.
Michaela was driven to the hospital by the police.
The consultant came in and he said, we're getting specialists from other hospitals, we're going to get fluid into her, we're going to get blood into her. And then literally, I don't know how long it was, but it didn't seem like very long. He came in, he said, basically there's nothing else we can do for her.
It's awful. It's just because that was the hardest thing to hear.
You're constantly telling yourself, it's okay, she's not dead. Yeah, until somebody tells you your child is gone, you always have that little bit of hope. Kind of like, it can't happen to me though, it wouldn't happen to me. This happens to other people, it doesn't happen to me.
It was heartbreaking, it really was, and you don't know what to say. It was then, the next day, I then had to break it to the kids who didn't understand how one day she could be there and then the next day she's not. Which is why it was so hard, because every time we went back into the dance and into the hall, the kids knew she wasn't there.
The week after Holly's death, a vigil was held in Hexham. The impact on this small market town clear to see, with hundreds turning out in Holly's honour. Candles illuminated the bandstand in the park, and many wore purple, her favourite colour. Holly's funeral was held a few weeks later, and there was another large showing of support from the wider community.
It's just that real mixture of emotions I think people are feeling today, remembering with great fondness Holly's life for those who knew her, and seeing beyond the tragic circumstances of her death.
Several hundred people turned up, not just the people from the school, who obviously the most impacted by it, and the family, but people from all ages came. You know, the whole fabric of Hexham wanted to pay respects. But I think there was just this emotional impact on the town, and the town just wanted to offer support and camaraderie.
In July 2024, Logan MacPhail finally went on trial for Holly's murder at Newcastle Crown Court. The trial took more than 18 months to get to court. That's because the defendant had autism and his legal team had applied for him to be found unfit to plead. This means they argue that he couldn't fully comprehend the legal proceedings. But after hearing all of the evidence from various experts, the judge ruled that he could understand them. MacPhail admitted manslaughter, claiming his mind had gone blank and that he couldn't remember the attack. But he denied Holly's murder, saying he'd planned to hurt himself, not her. The police investigation, though, revealed the lengths he'd gone to track her that day.
The mobile phones of Logan and Holly had their location settings open, so we were able to extract that data and analyse where they'd been. So we were able to, using CCTV and then the GPS from the phone, follow everywhere Logan had been, and then Holly at the same time. So we were able to work out at which point and which place Logan found and started following Holly, so that the amount of evidence available of this, the stalking element, the following element, was plentiful. It's almost a complete journey from when he gets to Hexham to when he's arrested by police.
The evidence meant officers didn't believe MacPhail's claims his mind had gone blank during the attack.
When you look at everything else he's done for a period of almost a full 24 hours, desperately to speak to Holly, very clear and deliberate and considered acts and decisions to get around and to find her and to try and manipulate other people to get her face to face with him, to then all of a sudden have a 60-second memory lapse and memory loss, just never had any credibility for me.
The jury didn't believe MacPhail's version of events either, and he was found guilty of Holly's murder in August 2024. There were sighs of relief from the public gallery this afternoon where Holly's mum and stepdad were sitting as that guilty verdict came in.
To think that Holly should have been collecting her GCSE exam results last week, but instead our baby girl's future was cruelly taken away from her. We are grateful to the many people who have shown their support as we continue to navigate a life without Holly in it. No result will ever bring our beautiful girl back.
On the 1st of November 2024, Logan MacPhail was jailed for a minimum of 17 years for murdering Holly Newton and attacking the boy that tried to save her.
Holly was a child. Although you were not an adult, she was no match for you, armed with a knife. She had severe injuries as she sought to defend herself from the knife. She must have realised before she died, I'm afraid, that she was fighting for her life. But the stark facts are that you made the decision to stab a 15-year-old girl to death with a knife which you were carrying unlawfully in a public place, having followed her in secret around town for an hour. All because your relationship with her had ended and you were jealous at the thought that she might see someone else. What happened in this case should not happen to any child or parent, and no child or parent should be in fear that it might happen.
In official police statistics, Holly's death was recorded as knife crime because in the eyes of the law, as a child, she couldn't be the victim of domestic abuse, something her family says they don't believe is right.
I just don't think it should be classed as knife crime because it was so much more than that. I feel like for me, knife crime is related to gangs. That was never Holly. She had nothing to fight back with. The only connection it's got is the fact that he killed her with a knife. But in all honesty, I think he would have killed her with anything just so she couldn't be with anyone else because it was all about control, obsession and passion.
One thing what I would like to see is the domestic violence age reduced where it can be classed as a crime, especially with children getting into the relationships younger.
But unfortunately, because Holly's not 16, in the eyes of the law, it's not being abused by a former partner.
The coercive side of it, that came about a little bit through the messages, where he would talk about the breakup and how he would harm himself if she wouldn't speak to him. He would harm himself if she broke up with him, which is a fairly common tactic of perpetrators to get people back on side. There's a sympathy element. Don't break up with us, otherwise I'll harm myself. And for a 15-year-old girl to hear that, it can't have been easy for Holly and Holly didn't understand what that was.
Michaela agrees that there is confusion amongst young people about where lines need to be drawn in relationships.
I don't think she did understand that it was happening to her until the very last few days. I don't think she ever realised that what he was doing, even just controlling, is a form of abuse. It wasn't until, like I say, we all kind of got involved that she thought, yeah, this isn't right. I do think that this is something that should be going into schools. I think we spend a lot of time in schools talking to children about abuse at home, being abused by your parents, being abused by other family members, but there's not really any talk about being abused by a partner, being abused when you're in a relationship yourself.
Big thing I've taken away from the case itself is the relationship those two had at the age they are, and you realise just how much contact kids have with each other, and when kids are in a relationship now, those relationships are far more intense and involved than I think a lot of adults probably appreciate. So I think as a society, it's to be mindful of what kids are involved in and how they're involving themselves with others, and just talk to them and promote healthy relationships and boundaries and understanding what's appropriate and what's not.
We asked the UK government for a response to Holly's murder and the classification of her killing. The Home Office provided a statement describing her murder as horrific and that the thoughts of those in government remain with Holly Newton's loved ones, adding that the government wants to reduce violence against women and girls by half in a decade. As part of this, we will be looking closely at how we can intervene at the earliest opportunity to protect girls when children present such harmful behaviours.
Our mission now is to buy the bleed boxes and trauma kits and to run educational visits like this.
Michaela and Lee are now turning their attention to educating young people on the dangers of knives, like this group of youngsters in Ashington. They're also fundraising for as many bleed kits as possible to be put up in towns across the northeast. The kits are in boxes that look a bit like defibrillators and give the public access to the medical equipment needed to help stop bleeding if someone's injured. The effects of Holly's death continue to ripple amongst those who knew her.
The older ones who instantly thought, like, never having a boyfriend, never going to go out with somebody, never going to do these things because of what's happened with Holly. And that's not, they shouldn't be living the life like that. A lot of the questions were why? And I can't answer that. Nobody can answer that except him.
Somebody once said to me at the beginning, who'd also lost a child, that you'll realise that you feel like you're stood still and the whole world is just moving around you. And I thought, I don't know how that can be. And it wasn't until a few weeks later I thought, I was somewhere and I thought, you know what, they're right. I felt like I was frozen and the whole world was still moving. And you kind of look at people and you think, how can you just carry on with your life? My daughter's died. Do you know what I mean? But life does have to go on.
For me, I keep myself going by going to work every day. It's the only thing I can do to stop myself from going into a downward spiral.
But what else are you meant to do? And you have to just make everything as normal as you can for those other children, because he's ruined our lives and he's took Holly's, but their life doesn't deserve to be ruined. And I don't want them to think that he's also taken things away from them. And I said from very early on, they've lost their sister. I'm not going to let them lose their mother as well.